Thank you very much, Mr. Cave. I'm Michael Higg, Chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Party. I want to thank all of you so much for showing up here tonight. It's going to be a great event, hearing from the candidates for Congressional District 8, hear what they have to say before, and so we can all make a good informed decision as we head into the voting booth for primary day. I wanted to let everyone know that our Lincoln Day dinner is coming up. Our guest speaker will be Senator Tom Cotton, and the date will be May 17th. So mark your calendars to come on out to the Bethesda DoubleTree. Then we've had, or a place we've had several great events in the past, and help join the Montgomery County Party for an excellent night with a top-notch speaker. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things back over to your most excellent host and MC tonight, Jerry Cave.
You have 2 hours to stop saying that. Thank you, Mike. Okay, let me go over the rules. This is going to be, I've been told by Dwight to do an Oprah Winfrey style. I've never watched the show, but I look a lot like her, so I get it. I can do this. And everybody's going to have, well, not you all, they're going to have 90 seconds to tell us how great they are, why we want to vote for them. If you guys get stumped on that, I'll help you out, no problem. And then questions are going to come from you all. And let me see if the microphone works. Can you all hear that? No. Okay, so you're going to have to speak up. And if you speak softly, just tell me and I will speak up. So think of good questions. And normally when we have these, they say, now everybody be nice and polite and respectful and all that. You know, I don't care. So let's not do that. Let's have some fun tonight. Do whatever you want. Let it all hang out. Politics is a contact sport. It certainly will be when you get into the general. Dwight, did I forget anything? No, you're good. Okay. So I'm going to have them, you all are going to address, open up with your first 90 seconds. And the one question that everybody has asked, if you could address in your first 90 seconds, is why in last night's national championship basketball game, there were 3 kids from Maryland who weren't playing for the Maryland Terrapins, huh? That joke I thought would do better. I was just kidding. You don't have to do that. So we have Dan Cox, if you would please open up and tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am a small businessman and an attorney, and I'm running to bring a different and a strong conservative voice back into the 8th District. I believe jobs, freedom, and security are the 3 main issues. And I believe that by uniting the conservative center-right voice of the Republican Party, we can actually make a difference in this election for the open seat. My background is I'm a former elected official. I've served as a town council member and a president of the town council. I also served as chairman of my wife's county's Republican Party, Dorchester County. When we came back from law school, I couldn't stay out of politics, so in the interim, I was in that position. And we worked very hard to get a Republican elected by the name of Andy Harris, and did some other good work, did some fundraising. I have a passion to bring a positive voice to this district. And as I'm out there knocking on doors, I'm hearing that there's a lot of concern that, you know, how can we actually make a difference? And I think we can. And I'd ask for your vote on April 26th. I'd be glad to talk to you more about my vision afterwards. Thanks.
That's great, Dan. Thank you very much. Also, everybody, we're going to go by first name. Everybody's agreed to that. And I forgot to introduce Jeff, who is our timekeeper. So he will give you a sign like that. It means you have 10 seconds left. And Jeff Jones, you've got a full 90.
Oh boy, thank you. I'm Jeff Jones, and I'm running for the Republican 8th District, the seat to follow Chris Van Hollen. I've been a pastor for 40 years, and practically most of my ministry has been within the 8th District, except when they moved the line a little bit. But I think that the important thing is that we need to recognize that the House of Representatives is from somebody who can represent the people in the district. And as a pastor for the last 40 years, I've been doing the weddings and doing the funerals and participating in the lives of folks from Manchester and Westminster down to College Park over to North Bethesda, and have been a part of the community. I've been a volunteer fireman, I've been in the Lions Club, I've been the PTA president, and I've been connected and participating in the life of the community. This is my very first time to run for a political office, because I felt like the squabbling going on sounded more to me like couples who come to get some help while they're squabbling. And I figured, who better to end the squabbling between the Republicans and the Democrats than somebody who deals with squabbling all the time? So my real effort is to try to bring a sense of what Lincoln really said about of the people, for the people, by the people. You know, he struggled really hard towards the end of the Civil War to bring those two sides back together. And he said that the differences are important and can help each other out, but we have to look beyond them. And that's my emphasis. That's what I really want to bring, is a sense of knowing that the people from the district have a voice in Congress that understands and recognizes those situations. Thank you very much.
Jeff, thank you very much. And our next candidate is Aryeh Shadovsky.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Aryeh Shadovsky. My wife and I are raising our 3 young kids in Silver Spring, and I'm running for Congress to make a better place to raise my family and for you to raise yours. The American people are waiting for leaders who actually deal with some of the common sense to find solutions to some of the problems that we're all dealing with on a daily basis. Common sense solutions that our leadership in Washington is so busy focusing on partisan squabbles that they can't actually get around to dealing with. We're talking about improving the economy, bringing jobs back to Maryland. I think you've all heard about the fact that we're looking at a potential increase in the minimum wage to $15 and an increase in the property tax, an 8% increase, which is going to drive businesses and people out of this district. And we've already seen the outflow of people from Frederick County into Western Pennsylvania, retirees leaving this area for Delaware and Florida because there's no sales tax or there's no state income tax. We watch billions of tax dollars flowing out of the state, and our leadership, both on the federal, state, and local level, is doing nothing to actually help people and make this a better place for all of us to live. On an international scale, again, and just in this past week, we watched as our government has stayed silent, as the UN Commission on the Status of Women came out with a report that condemned only one country out of 192, Israel, for their treatment of women. That's including countries that have forcible circumcision, don't allow women to drive, who believe in honor killings. I mean, our government is sitting silent, and we need leadership in Washington who actually can focus on that.
Aryeh, thank you very much. Our next candidate is Liz Vittori.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Vittori, and we have to be honest. The Democrats gerrymandered this district to make it virtually impossible for Republicans to win it. First, they stole it from Connie. Then they gerrymandered the crap out of the district in 2011, bringing it from here all the way up to the Pennsylvania border. A traditional Republican will not win this seat unless we make a bold stance. I ask you today to make sure that we actually have to survive the general to even get to all these issues that are facing us. Their number one complaint about us, or the gripe that they have, is they say that we are sexist, xenophobic bigots. And unfortunately, the other candidates cannot just stand up and say you're wrong. I think they've made that argument twice already in the debate that Jeff and I were at, twice in the last month. We have to really stand tall and actually beat them at their own game. They use fake feminism and, yes, political correctness to deflect us from the issues that we have that we need to focus on specifically. We can't even get to protecting our 2A rights or protecting life from conception to natural death. We can't even get to protecting our borders. We can't even get to watching our fiscal spending until we actually survive this general. I am blessed to actually know what the Republican Party stands for and know that that conservative values are something that we actually need and we need to invest in. So if we really actually want to grow the tent, we want to win this seat, we have to make sure that we make a bold stance and support me for Congress. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. And our next candidate is Shelley Skolnick.
Thank you.
I'll endorse some of the comments by Liz, but not the last part about voting for her. The part I do agree with Liz on is the gerrymandering. It was by the Democrat governor, the Democrat legislature. We have the second worst gerrymandered U.S. congressional districts of any state. Only North Carolina is worse than us. So I don't think that they made Congressional District 8 good for Republicans, especially conservative Republicans. It's heavily Democrat towards the liberal side. I consider myself a moderate Republican, and that's how I ran in prior elections. 2 years ago, I ran for the county council at large in Montgomery County. as a moderate. And on specific issues, I'm doing the same this year with my flyer on specific solutions. Well, in that campaign 2 years ago, the Washington Post endorsed me as one of the candidates for the county council at large. Very unusual. I think it was the only Republican endorsed by the Washington Post for an office. And you know, there were numerous offices 2 years ago that were up for election. And that's what I believe we need if we want to win the 8th Congressional District, the gerrymandered 8th Congressional District, as Liz so aptly described it. And not a conservative, but I really think a moderate. The most conservative, I think Ronald Reagan said, vote for the most conservative person who can, or Bill Buckley said, vote for the most conservative person who can win. And I believe a moderate is the most conservative person who can win.
Shelley, thank you very much. Now it's time for you to talk. We'd like to hear from you all with your question. So who's going to be our first victim? Dun, 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 dun.
I know you aren't shy. Okay.
How do you feel about minimum wage?
Is it directed to anyone in particular?
Well,
Who would you like to answer that?
it doesn't matter.
Any or all? Liz, you're first.
Right, so a little bit about me. I actually got my MBA from the University of Maryland in 2014. I went back after law school specifically for the economic downturn. I felt at the time government wasn't paying enough attention to our entire economy, and so I wanted to learn more. So as a business person myself, and to be able to talk to a lot of small business owners, actually yesterday the person who owns some of the diners in the area said that the $15 minimum wage is going to ruin all the mom and pop stores, if not across the state, across the country. It's happening in Washington State. It's happening in California, particularly in the service industry. Unfortunately for me, I think, and I said this in 2014 when I ran for state delegate, is that we're focusing too much on the minimum wage and not focused on the American wage. We have gutted our economy ever since 1994, since I was 14, and we need to be proactive, assertive right now to make sure that we have everything in the middle. There are way too many people who are trying to survive on the minimum wage, and it's un-American, and we do need more people who are not only mindful of that need, that immediate need, but will take on the tough questions that we need to face as a country and a society. So I don't support, I'm about to say, I was about to say, I do not support a $15 minimum wage. I think that our state has made some gradual ascensions to it. It could be good to have a state by state, but $15 would, equate someone who is trained. It pushes, it degrades the wages of trained workers. Not only will it get rid of, some of the small businesses, it will degrade the value of people who are actually trained to do.
Liz, thank you very much. What we failed to emphasize is that if your answers to questions could be in the 30 to 45 seconds.
Oh,
range.
I'm my bad. Okay.
No, actually, it was our bad. We didn't make that clear, and I have made that clear to Jeff, and he has agreed to make that clear to you. So who else would like to address that question? Shelley?
With the limited time, I'll read from my flyer. Federal minimum wage increased to $10 per hour for workers with a high school degree. However, exempt small employers with less than 10 workers or less than $500,000 in annual revenue. By having those qualifications, high school kids can get jobs at the $7.25 minimum wage. And small businesses, very small businesses with less than 10 workers or less than $500,000 in annual revenue are not hurt by the economic burden of a much higher minimum wage.
Thank you, Shelley. Anyone else? REA, would you like to address it?
I mean, it's critical that we ensure opportunity for everybody to actually be able to afford lifestyle, to be able to live, to rent a home, to buy a home, whatever else they want to do. But a federal mandate of a minimum wage is going to destroy jobs, and it's going to destroy the ability for business to actually function here. If we're looking out for people who can't look out for themselves, what we need to do is to foster economic growth, to create opportunity for businesses to grow, for jobs to invest, for businesses to invest in themselves, to create jobs. That's how we're going to ensure that people who are struggling actually have the opportunity to succeed.
Sure. I oppose a raise of the minimum wage, and I support a maximum wage. And what I have done is looked at the tax foundation's independent analysis of our tax code and the opportunities that we have to actually provide 12.2% more income in everybody's paychecks through a simple flat tax. And so that's what I've endorsed, and I would work very strongly for that. And I think it will do a lot. It'll do a lot more than $15 an hour for everybody.
I'm taking a stab at it too. I oppose the idea that one set number will fit the whole country. The cost of living is different in every place around the country, and to have one that's supposed to fit everybody will create more problems than it will solve. The other side of that is we need to find ways, and there's several efforts, and they're all mentioned and good ideas, for helping families be able to provide what are the basic needs. And that's going to require a little more money, especially if you live in this particular area, to be able to afford to live here, to purchase food here, to purchase the place to manage the household expenses. So we have to look at it. I would like to see us look at indexing for the cost of living in the region. That the area itself and the cost of living should help set a limit.
Thanks, Jeff. Next question.
Yeah.
Dwight.
Yes, I wanted to just a quick question for all kids. Are you pro-life or pro-choice? Just a simple yes or no, just go straight down.
Pro-life, 100%. In fact, that was just endorsed today by Maryland Right to Life.
Jeff?
The answer is pro-choice. I believe in life, but I believe that people ought to have the opportunity to have a choice. It doesn't mean I'm for abortion, but it's a choice.
Pro-life.
Pro-life.
What I call pro status quo. In other words, I believe it should be between a woman and her doctor.
That's clear.
What is the greatest national security threat facing our country, and if elected, what would you do about it? For the whole country?
Who did you address that question to? You want everybody. Okay, so why don't we start with RA, and then we'll go to Jeff and finish up, and then come back to Shelley. RA?
I think certainly the most clear and present danger is going to be ISIS. And what we need to be doing is actually working with our allies to create a comprehensive plan to combat ISIS, not one of these ad hoc piecemeal efforts that we've been seeing up to this point. It's going to involve potentially boots on the ground, either actual military on the ground or military advisory. It's going to involve weapons. It's going to involve aid. It's going to involve diplomacy. We have to use every arsenal that we have, working with our allies in the Middle East, other countries, the Kurds, in order to ensure that we're actually combating ISIS where they are and not waiting for them to come to our shores to attack us first.
Thank you, Jeff.
I would say the same thing. The idea is ISIS is our biggest issue, and no one solution is going to fit. So we got to do some economic strangulation, and we're working on that. We've got to get cooperation from our neighbors. We have got to find ways to understand the motivation behind it, because often the motivation, once it's really understood, will diffuse some of those who participate in it. And so that's a part of the solution also.
Dan, you're up.
I would agree, ISIS and also the immense power assertions of Iran. And I think that those terror threats are significant. And if we simply would turn to our military strength and advisors, we could destroy ISIS rather quickly in Raqqa and its other bases there, and wipe out their strength and stop the money flow. That's the key to ISIS's strength right now, is they have an immense amount of oil, and it's creating a lot of power that they can utilize.
Thanks, Dan. Shelley, you're up.
Okay. I don't agree with Mitt Romney on a lot of things, but I agree with him on the fact that Russia, I believe, is our biggest adversary right now. They have the largest military, they have the largest number of nuclear weapons and missiles. And that's just what they have. And they've had that for years, ever since the Soviet Union broke up. But what's different now is Putin seems to be very aggressive both in Ukraine and Syria, Crimea. So you have a very strong adversary that's now trying to expand their influence. And to combat them, I think we ought to be working with Saudi Arabia and other oil-producing countries to maximize production, lower the price of oil, lower the price of natural gas. That would really affect Russia. Russia depends heavily upon the export of oil and natural gas, and I think we can, in an economic sense, restrain them and we do not need to hopefully have any military conflict with them.
Thank you. Liz?
So I think our national security threats are so present and everywhere that it's the support of our military and our special forces and intelligence that we need to make sure that we are supporting them. We're scaling back our military at astronomical rates. We are not speaking with one voice as a country. Our divisive politics can be considered cumbersome for the rest of the world. And as the sole superpower, we need to make sure that we are giving the strength and the might of the military at all times. So I would say support of our military and our troops.
I'd like to ask a question, and all of you can address it, and you have some pretty wide latitude. And take into consideration that all of the countries I'm going to mention in this question are all wealthy. They're trade competitors. Most of them are able to give their citizens better benefits than we are. Does it make sense to you that we are borrowing money from the Chinese to defend Korea and Japan from the Chinese, and that we are paying for the defense of Europe from the Red Army? All respect, it doesn't exist anymore. Does this make sense to you? If it does, please explain why. If it doesn't make sense to you, explain that one. Who would like to go first? Liz, you moved.
Oh, well, that was something that I had mentioned before. My mom's Filipino, so I know very well about the bases that we had in the Philippines. My grandfather served in the, and he unfortunately was a part of the Bataan Death March. So we should have supported. We should have stayed where we were. We should have continued to invest in the places worldwide, and then we scaled down, and now we have to depend on others. I do think that China is a huge threat. But of course, our economic security and our dependence on other countries to bolster that strength is a big problem. So
I probably didn't answer this very well, but my point is that we're footing the bill for this when these wealthy nations are not. Japan's not, Korea's not, Europe's not. We're footing the bill. They got plenty of money. They're not spending it, and they're giving their citizens benefits we can't afford to give ours.
Right, I would push back.
Let me give you another crack at that.
Yeah, I would push back on the saying that Japan and Korea are wealthy nations. Unfortunately, their economy is erratic. I think Japan is an aging population, so unfortunately, like for us, millennials is the largest generation, so we actually have a benefit there, but they're actually dying because they have their limits on their population. So I think the Asian countries are slightly different from European countries.
REA?
Well, I guess to answer what your question sounded like initially, I would say that we're not borrowing money in order to defend these countries. We're borrowing money because discretionary spending is such a tiny sliver of what we spend. We're borrowing money for the entitlements for the mandatory spending. Does it make sense that we're footing the bill to defend these countries? We're not 100% footing it to defend them as much as we're defending strategic allies and our own strategic objectives in these different regions. And so it is important that we ensure that we have military presence in the South China Sea, in other parts of Asia, and other parts of the world, but not to the extent that we're actually providing military defense to the country itself.
Jeff?
Well, that's part of the challenge that we face. We are a globe these days, and unfortunately, the resources are in various places. And I think, as Arya said, we have got to make sure that we're well connected with our allies, because it creates a buffer zone for us in some cases. And it's going to be difficult to see where all of the spending goes. That we have to borrow because we haven't figured out a way to do a justified income tax system. We have to borrow because we have spent to protect and help a lot of other people, and it's going to be a challenge. You have to juggle that.
Dan, you're up.
I think that NATO is essential, and we look at a case in chief is Ukraine. Russia is currently at war with Ukraine. However, I agree, we've got to use the leverage of the White House to ensure that the parties that are participating are paying their fair share. And so I think that has not been done to the point where it should be, and I think the White House could have and could do more in that area. But I think that in any way, negating the role of NATO could be disastrous.
Shelley, you're last on this question.
I'll take that. Our two main adversaries are China and Russia. And you look at how many allies do they have versus how many allies does the U.S. have? China has what, North Korea as an ally? Russia has Syria, maybe Iran, maybe part of Ukraine. So while I agree that it's unfortunate we have to pay so much, but look what we're gaining in the world. We have so many allies and they have so few that I think it's well worth it.
Thank you. Mike, over there, up against wall, you have one.
Multiple choice question.
Oh,
The
no.
answers are pathway to citizenship, permanent resident status, round them up and ship them home. What would you do about the illegal immigration?
What are they? Pathway to citizenship.
Pathway to citizenship, permanent resident status,
Without citizenship.
without citizenship, and send them home.
Why don't we
How
start
would
with you, Jeff?
Address the illegal immigration issue.
Is that AB?
I thought you were talking about the IRA. Okay, Jeff, you're still up.
Good, thank you. We need to remember that we are all immigrants, which means we lived someplace else before we lived here. Some came over the land bridge 450,000 years ago. Some were forced, dragged, captured, and brought over here. Some came because they were fugitives. Some came because their family was already here. And some came because this was a great country that'll give them a chance to start a foundation. I think if people want to be citizens, we ought to find a fair and established and clear way for that to happen. I think those who are totally ignoring what the blessings of this country are need to be invited to go back home.
Thank you, Dan.
I would stand with the legal immigrants that are opposed to a pathway to citizenship or any kind of legal residency apart from the law. The rule of law, as I understand it, in the immigration work that I've done as an attorney, provides already for exceptions for those who need it, such as asylum. I strongly support those exceptions. But when somebody is sneaking across our border, bringing drugs, that's a criminal. And, you know, doing criminal acts the reason why we love America and why people come here is because of the rule of law. So if we properly enforce the law with compassion, but equally, then I think we'll have the immigration issue solved, and I would deport those who, and I think President Clinton has, he has a record of deporting over 16 million. So this is something that can be done with compassion under the rule of law.
Shelley.
I guess I would take, I think it's B or the second choice, which is that not a pathway to citizenship, but a pathway to a green card, with an exception, say, if you do military service. In an earlier forum, I come out and said that I would be for the Senate bill that passed the Senate, with the exception that that bill allowed a pathway to citizenship. My modification would be a pathway to a green card, with the exception that if you do certain things like military service, then you can also become a citizen.
Thank you, Shelley. Liz?
I would like to say B, but I also think that would be awarding people who are taking advantage of the generosity of our country. As I mentioned before, my mom is, she's obviously, she's not obvious, but she's an American citizen now. She'll say that she's as American as Michael Jackson, Mickey Mouse, and the American apple pie. But it kind of, this is the issue with the immigration problem now. It degrades all the people who have done what they've needed to do to abide by our rules and regulations and apply for either residency or citizenship. But even to say permanent residency would negate their hard work as well. So I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did. The deportation is going to be harsh. It would affect a lot of people that live down the street from us. So I wouldn't say C either. So I apologize for not being able to give you a good answer to that.
All right, you're going to round this one off.
Well, I think the first problem is actually identifying who the 11 or 12 million people are. So people who are in the system because they've committed crimes since they came here illegally can certainly be identified and certainly should be deported because they're criminals. They've committed crimes in this country. People who came here illegally, and it's challenged to actually identify who they are. Do they deserve legal status here? Do they deserve citizenship? They absolutely do not. But I think that we can provide an opportunity for people to come, as they call it, out into the light, to pay taxes, to pay into the system, not to benefit from the system, but to pay into the system, and to be penalized for the fact that they came here illegally, but not to receive any benefits as a result.
Thank you. I think most of you did very well in not answering A, B, or C. Pat, we have a question over here.
I'm concerned about the national debt and what are the possibilities of bringing that down?
Let's start with Dan.
It's a runaway problem. $19.2 trillion in debt. If you look at the charts, it's frightening. But it's something that we can address through an appropriate and strong economic policy. It is a policy-driven issue. And I would submit that the best way forward is to challenge the tax code with a simple flat tax, because that's going to grow jobs. And when you have jobs, you're going to have an incredible amount of income flowing, and business is going to then spread through the small businesses and through the jobs. And that's going to allow additional revenues without in any way stressing the economy. And it needs to be done immediately.
Was that for everybody?
Yes.
Then we will move.
All right. Yes, the debt issue is horrible. The trouble is, most of us are finding ourselves in the same situation. We've overspent. And so how do we take the energy and determination to curb our spending? Like Dan, I think we need, jobs, the change in the tax system for sure. We can't have people who can really afford it not paying any taxes at all. I think if we concentrate on jobs, especially in our transportation and road business, the folks who get those jobs are the ones who buy the washing machines and the cars and buying the houses, and that stimulates the whole economy.
Thank you.
Well, I think there's a long-term solution and a short-term solution. So to say to grow the economy, to create jobs, to widen the tax base solves the deficit problem, not the debt problem per se. When I was working as an economic policy advisor in Congress, we introduced a bill that actually would have attacked the outstanding debt by requiring the government to sell off real estate, other assets that we hold, and various other things that actually would have generated revenue that wasn't coming from the taxpayer base. But the largest way to actually deal with the outstanding debt that we have today is entitlement reform, because entitlements are the largest part of the budget. They're going to eat up the entire federal budget within the next 5 to 10 years, depending on who you believe. And that's the only way we can actually solve the outstanding debt problem.
I'm going to violate the rules and interject here for a minute. So I'm on a train with this guy who's in charge of like the base closures. And I said, listen, instead of like turning those things into park, why don't you sell that stuff, pay off the national debt? He says, oh, well, gee, that's just not what we do. I said, why don't you give it a try and get your hand out of everybody's pocket? Amazingly, he did not agree with me on that. But I love that idea.
I actually think that our growing debt is an example or a symptom of our crony capitalism. I wrote about that on my website, and I'll push it until the day I die. Both our economy and our politics have been corrupted by crony capitalism. What that means is, people like David Trone and the like pay to play. They pay lobbyists to lobby Congress, to lobby state legislatures around the country to create regulations and taxes to protect their market share, and we're paying the bill. So whether it's our tax code or the heavy regulations, it's an example of crony capitalism I want to stop with.
Thank you, Shelley. Round this out.
Right. Well, the key to the 19.2 trillion national debt is the annual deficit. We've got to get our balanced budget. And then once you get a balanced budget, then you can address the national debt. Last year, our deficit was about $540 billion. And you don't hear that number too much. You usually hear the 19 trillion in the debt. What I propose, again, it's in my flyers, everything's in writing, is a 4-year transition to a balanced budget. In other words, it seems to be a reasonable goal would be the first year to get it down to 400 billion, 300, 200, 100. But you don't hear that from any of the candidates, for president or even here, talking about a goal of reducing the annual deficit to get to a balanced budget in 4 years. I think that's the first step.
We have a question online, and then we'll come back into the audience. Is there anybody here that will not, if you don't win, I know you can't fathom it. If you don't win, will you support the winner of this primary? Is there anybody that will not do that? Great. Okay. And we had one more over here, then I'm gonna come to you.
I've worked as a subcontractor to the federal government for 40 years. And in that time, I've visited many agencies, and I have always seen waste that just sickens me. So my question is, would you support a zero-based budgeting bill Would you sponsor one? And if not, why not?
Is that for one person or all of them?
No, it's all of them.
I want to tell you something. You all are really in a sharing mood. You don't just want to have your question for one person. You want to let everybody. Now, Shelley, you haven't had a chance to go first in a while, so we're going to let you have first crack at that.
Well, we always hear about waste, fraud, and abuse, and it's there, and it's always, a lot of it is near the end of the fiscal year on that. Zero-based budgeting, perhaps, that, I'm not sure if that's a solution versus, I'd like to have incentives for agencies not to spend all their money at the end of the year or during the year. If they don't have to spend it, I'd like to have some incentive where they, maybe a 50% or a certain percentage they could use in the future. Because it just seems to be human nature, the way it's set up now, it just encourages waste. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of it, and I'm sure there is still a lot of it. So that would be my solution.
Liz, you're next.
I agree that, end of year spending, what is it that they don't think they're going to get the next year if they don't spend the year prior to, something on the like where you can, budget for that next year and not be penalized. If you can create your budget to be, fiscally minded and not be penalized for the next year when you might need more funding, something like that where it's like a year-to-year plan. 5-year plan, what have you. I think a lot of the contracts are 5 years out. Funny little note is that Ike Leggett was my government contracts professor at Howard Law. He was teaching us while he was running for county executive. So I was able to teach myself about government contracts.
I'm very proud that you did not let that poison your,
Hey,
your education.
It took me a while
Are
to
you?
get free.
I certainly think that it's a laudatory process to say that let's start from zero and build in that direction. But if you watch the appropriations process, when you have all these countless spending cutting amendments that are offered to all sorts of the appropriations bills to return the money to pay down the national debt, and you see the actual distance that any of those amendments make is not very far. But I do think that the direction we need to move in is to say is to cut out the waste. Because I think that it's a more effective and more potentially plausible direction to move in than to say let's start from zero. Because when you start from zero, you're going to have everyone in the room lobbying for their dollars, as opposed to moving in the other direction, which I think would have more of a positive effect.
I think one of the challenges that we need to face is definitely the issue of waste, and I think part of it is that we're all afraid, as they have all said, we won't have the money next year if we don't spend it now. As the pastor of a church, we deal with the budget every year, and the same thing happens in a small setting like that. If I don't spend my money, or if I don't say this is how much I'm going to need, they're afraid that they won't have hardly anything to work with. So part of it is our own sense of greed. We think we've got to solve problems with money, and one of the things I'd like to advocate is that as community members, we begin to recognize that it's not always a federal dollar issue, but a chance for us to really begin to cooperate and work together.
Dan?
I would sponsor it. I would also caucus with the Freedom Caucus, and I would support the Ted Cruz 5 for Freedom plan. And the reason is this: I believe people are hungry for actual change to protect our country and to protect our businesses and protect our future. If we just go down to Washington and have an approach that winks at the waste, fraud, and abuse and doesn't begin creating incentives and strong standards, the end result is going to be a continuum of what we've seen. There's not going to be a change. So I think sending a conservative center-right as such as myself could help to make that difference and bridge the gap to those on the other side who are also hungry for that protective change.
It's fabulous, but you don't often get a panel that everybody agrees and we're all against waste. This young lady in the front, please.
My question piggybacks my question about immigration. We have a lot of people coming across the border, bringing drugs and criminals, and I know, General Dempsey told us that our southern flank is exposed. We know that there's flights from Tehran to Venezuela. We also know, this is the second part of my question, we also know that I was at a meeting with Jay Johnson. He told us that 10,000 refugees are moving forward with it from Syria, and they're coming soon. So Wall or no wall, refugees or no refugees, and why or why not?
Dan, let's start with you.
I would support a wall, and I'm against Syrian refugees being brought in under the current plan. Until the FBI director can vet them and certify that they are not going to be a threat, then we can't let them in. I had the opportunity of being in a meeting with former Congressman Frank Wolf and heard him talking about this. It's a serious issue. Those in the know are very well acquainted with how serious this is, and so to allow them to come in when the FBI director is on record with the Congress saying that he cannot assure us that there won't be another San Bernardino is very dangerous.
Jeff?
I don't think we need a wall. I think one of the problems that we have is that we are sponsoring the criminals coming in the sense that we can't stop ourselves from using the drugs. So that it looks like such a profitable thing that everybody's going to want to come for that reason. So part of the issue is our own self-control, which is not a congressional motive or a budget issue, etc. We've been promised that those refugees will be vetted before they come. And this country has stood for the right kinds of things, welcoming people who need a second chance.
RA?
I certainly think that a wall is part of any comprehensive plan to combat immigration, but it's not, it isn't reasonable to say that we're going to put a wall across the entire southern border. It's part of a comprehensive plan in conjunction with other things like boots on the ground or electronic surveillance or drones or whatever other components that we're looking to use, but it certainly would be cost prohibitive to try and build a wall across the entire border. I think that we need to halt any talks of bringing any immigrants over here, Syrian or otherwise, who we can't, until we can ensure that we can vet them, that we can understand what their backgrounds are, why they're coming, what they're coming for. And when Governor Hogan called for a moratorium on Syrian refugees, I applauded him and put a press release on it. I absolutely agree with him on that.
Liz?
Sorry, to start with the Syrian refugee issue, unfortunately, the people who will want to take advantage of it will take advantage of it. That's my concern. If we don't fully vet, if we don't make sure that, in every instance, and how does one do that? A lot of people are traveling without passports and all the like. So the moratorium I do support. I think it is actually not feasible to have a wall for the entire southern border. That's the wonderful thing about our country. It's a beautifully large, vast country. If anything, as Arya said, we need a comprehensive approach, make sure that all the borders are protected, that we get the support they need, the finances they need, and I would argue again with I wouldn't argue, I would support what Jeff said. Yeah, we are demanding the drugs that have protected the cartels and the like.
Yeah, I'm against the wall. It's like the Maginot Line. We know what ineffective that was as far as protecting the French from the Germans in World War II. And there's technology and there are other ways of protecting the southern border. We also have people overstay. There are a lot of people who are here illegally, came here illegally and just overstayed. 9/11, people who were brought down the plains, they can come from the southern border. They were, as I recall, they had visas, they overstayed. As far as refugees, we all agree that they ought to be vetted. But we ought to have a can-do attitude. This country, we put a man on the moon in less than a decade. Surely we can vet 10,000 Syrians. I mean, there are orphans, there are senior citizens, there are people who are clearly easy to vet. And I would set it at a time when there are more refugees in the world than any time since World War II. There are millions, tens of millions of refugees throughout the world. We can't take 10,000. We can't vet them quickly. I would set a goal of doing it very quickly and doing a very good job and showing that we can do something, that we take the words of Donald Trump, that we can win again, that we can show that we can do that in a very short period of time.
Thank you, Shelley. Quinn, that's a question.
Yes. I realize fundraising can be tough in this district, but I was on the FEC website today, and as far as I can tell, only Liz and Arya have posted any fundraising at all whatsoever. So to make this broad question, I guess my question would be, what's your plan for getting your message out to hundreds of thousands of voters in a brief period of time? Especially if you haven't raised any money so far, but what's your game plan going forward?
So that sounds like how you going to win, how you going to raise the money to get your message out and make it happen.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I go the lowest fundraiser to highest.
I tell you what we'll do. Why don't you all pool your money like Marty said? Okay, I didn't think that was gonna work.
Redistribute the wealth.
Daniel.
Well, when I worked for Congressman Roscoe Bartlett, one of my friends that worked on his campaign with me is now Congressman Alex Mooney, and I've been in touch with his fundraisers. If I were to secure the nomination, then those doors would open. And that's my part of my money raising strategy. I also have not been able to spend a huge amount of time fundraising because I got in this race late. I actually jumped in on February 1st. And so my strategy has been grassroots, and if the people support that and nominate me, then you bet we'll raise the money. I used to raise $10,000 a week for Congressman Bartlett. I think I can do it for my campaign.
Well, I'd like to see you after the show at $10,000 a week. It's pretty impressive. Get out of your current gig. Jeff, you're next.
Washington Post called me the other day and said, how come we don't see your name on the federal fundraising list? I said, well, how much money do you have to get on that list? And he said, $5,000. He said, well, call me back when I get to that point. You know, part of my inspiration is that it's all about money. Why should I jump in and do the money thing? You know, I grew up thinking that David versus Goliath was a good thing. And yes, I would love to have more money. I'm hoping some of you will consider that. There is information on my website and my Facebook for contributing, but we're trying to convince people that the idea is still the best way to go.
Jorge?
I mean, I've been raising money since day one. It is a challenge in this area, certainly, particularly if you're not through the nomination yet, because people say you have a hill to climb to the general election, you're not the nominee yet. But it's about getting out there and talking to people. It's about ensuring that other people are talking to people, that your name is heard, that you're knocking on doors, that you're shaking hands at the Metro or outside of Giant or Costco, and meeting people, but also utilizing the resources that we do have for mailings, for presence at the polling places, for various other things. I think once we get down to the general election and you have two major party candidates, you are, you know, as Dan said, you are talking about a different situation. Will the money pour in the same on the Republican side? No. But if we use our resources wisely, I think that we have a strong shot.
Thank you, Ari. Liz?
I think RA has probably 8 times the amount that I have, just from the jump, just want to let you know. And quite frankly, let's be honest, the national race has made it extremely difficult for me to fundraise. I just got off the phone right before this, talking to one of my dear friends, saying that how can you be a part of a team, a party of Trump? As who you are, it takes me an entire hour to have that conversation, unfortunately. But luckily, I have support from friends and family. I have Howardites supporting Howardites. So I have a lot of, we have an aggressive field team. And also, once I win this primary, unfortunately or fortunately, it will become a national race because there's only 2 other black people in Congress from the Republican side.
Thank you, Liz. Shelley?
With the internet, there's lots of information available. You can Google our names and go to our websites and other items about us. And so it's my goal or hope that those who come out in the primary are usually the very active people. You know, oftentimes we have low turnout. So if they don't know about us, it's very easy at home. You don't have to look in the mailbox. You don't have to look at us on TV to get information. So I think that there's plenty of information out there readily available to those who plan to vote in the primary. In the general election, now that's going to be more of a challenge because most likely whoever wins here will face someone who's going to spend over $1 million. As you know, the Democrat candidates, there are 3 out of the 9 who spend over $1 million. My goal or plan would be to work with the other Republican candidates. As you know, we only have 1 Republican congressman in Maryland, so the other 7 would work with, or plus Andy Harris too. We're trying to do a team approach where we can agree on certain issues and kind of combine our resources, because I don't think we're going to be able to match these millionaires that we may be facing in the 8th Congressional District.
Well, now that we got the pesky money things out of the way, we have another question, Dan, and then you'll be next.
My question is about federal oversight. One of the biggest issues in Maryland's Congressional District 8 in Montgomery County with me, the thing that angers me the most is the disaster that was the Paul S. Sarbanes Silver Spring Transit Center. Cost $140 million. They promised it was only going to cost us $20 million and take a couple of years. It took several years and cost us $140 million.
Jim Shalek, who ran for county executive, called for a federal investigation, which we hammered heavily. We got nothing. Chris Van Hollen protected the county government from a federal investigation. We have the same makings of this bus rapid transit thing that has been proposed by the Montgomery County government. This is another large transit project that could take years and cost more than money than they're predicting. And it could be the same results, in my opinion, as the Silver Spring Transit Center. If you are elected to Congress, we bring federal oversight to a project like that and make sure that if they do screw up, and if it's years and millions of dollars more than they promised, make sure that people are prosecuted and fired.
I think that was rather well put.
I would say yes, but I think even before you got to that, transit project should be privatized. There's no reason why a project like either one of those should actually be spending federal dollars on. I think that the private sector is going to manage them better. The private sector is looking at them as a business and not as social welfare. And so they're going to ensure that there's actually management and administration of the process. There's a budget that they're sticking to when they have to pay contractors. That's actually the way to go. But if it were a federal project and it turned out like the Sarbanes Transit Center, then absolutely, I think that there should be investigations in that, and we should deal with the situation.
Liz.
I agree, but I do think it's an issue of the one-party rule that we have here, particularly in Montgomery County. I've been a part of those conversations when I was a Democrat in reference to the bus rapid transit that you're speaking of. There's no check and balance, even in those conversations with the county council. Then you have the county executive, and you got 7 of the 8 congressmen. And unfortunately, Andy Harris is one of 12 with our 2 senators. So I would argue having more representatives that are Republican and other electeds that will be able to push that from the beginning.
Thanks, Charlie. Okay, 2 years ago when I ran for the county council, I offered the BLT, bus lane toll, as an alternative to the BRT. The Democrats all wanted the BRT, which is a $2 billion project for like 99 miles. It's absurd. And in 2 years, nothing has happened except they're doing some more studies for a couple $1 million. In Congress, I would push there are very easy, practical solutions that are not being offered that can be done quickly and at much less cost. So on a boondoggle like the BRT, I would, 1, vote against that, but 2, offer an alternative, which is the BLT, which we can do now, which we can afford now, which will make a profit and will solve the problems. But yet, for some reason, the Democrats just love that BRT idea, although it hasn't happened, it probably never will happen. It's just too expensive. It's going to take land away from the red.
Shelley, thank you. I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever heard a better indictment of the Democrats in that. I mean, who doesn't like a BLT? Dan, you're up.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, if elected, I would call for congressional hearings on the issue. I pledge to make transportation a national security issue, because as the greatest city and region on the earth, I think sitting in traffic like we do and having these clogged lanes is absolutely unacceptable. And I would also work, and I think we need to elect somebody like Ted Cruz, a Republican president, because then they can activate the DOJ to do what you've asked to do. So I would use the power of our position in Congress to do that oversight. Yes.
Boy, you want to get yourself elected, and you want to pick the president too. Unbelievable. Jeff?
We need oversight. Whenever we see somebody who's just spending money like crazy or not getting a project done, somebody needs to, whether it's incentives to finish on time or penalties for not finishing, etc. The other challenge we have, as part of it, is that we're all still wanting to have everything done for us. The greatness of this country after the Civil War and during World War II was that we were willing to put aside some of our preferences in order to make it work. The bus line, for instance, is going to require that fewer people drive, and we get out of the lane so the bus can get where it needs to go. And that's an issue, a personal issue. We have to decide for the greater good.
Thank you. And we have a question right here.
Yes, Dan, you mentioned that you worked for Bartlett, Professor Bartlett. And I know he was a big proponent of the electric grid, which is one of the things that concerns me the most. I know that Congress has been looking at this issue ad nauseum for years and years and years, and it's never gone anywhere. I'm wondering if you and the rest of the panel can answer what would you do to push this issue so that it's finally addressed?
Well, is that for everybody or just for Dan?
Well, Dan to start, just because he worked for Roscoe Bartlett, I would think.
So it's for everybody, but you want to start with
Yeah,
Dan?
yeah. I don't
Total
know.
cooperation, young lady. So Dan, I'm doing what she said.
Yes.
You start.
And to clarify, you're talking about the EMP issue.
Yes.
And absolutely.
Everybody know what that is?
The-
Not like
the-
BLT, it doesn't taste nearly as good.
It's electromagnetic pulse issue, and it's a serious national security issue. I strongly support and supported Roscoe Bartlett's work on that issue. I would continue that effort.
An EMP is something that would fry the electrics of the grid, your car. Nobody really knows how much it'd be. They say, like, if you had a nuclear bomb go off in the atmosphere over Nebraska, it wouldn't just make popcorn in Nebraska, but it would fry our grids, which would give us a real problem going to 7-Eleven and getting coffee.
And not only that, but there's estimates by various groups, study groups, saying that it could cause some of the greatest deaths America's ever seen. And a recent report came out saying that the terrorists are seeking to obtain drones to use these kinds of weapons against us. So it is a national security issue. I would work very hard behind the scenes and on the committees with the Freedom Caucus and the other national security team that we have down in Washington to protect us from those threats.
One of the anchors, the network anchors, just wrote a book on this. Does anybody remember?
Tom Brokaw.
Was it Brokaw?
Tom Brokaw. Oh, Fred
Koppel.
Koppel.
Right, I knew it was one of those. Yes, thanks. Jeff, you're on.
Well, he's warning us that we're getting intertwined in so many different directions. I'm going to have to confer with those who are experts to say we need to protect ourselves. We need to become aware because we act like a snowstorm hits and we shut down. And if we don't recognize either the warning signs and be prepared or work together to find solutions, we're facing a gigantic snowstorm we're not digging out from for a very long time.
I
think it absolutely is a national security issue. It's surprising to think that because a nuclear detonation actually could have the same effect, that we haven't solved that problem yet. Our grids are vulnerable from all sorts of different both natural and unnatural attacks, and I think that we absolutely need to pursue a plan in order to ensure that we are safe from be it EMP, be it nuclear detonation, or be it anything else that would negatively impact our ability to function on a daily basis.
Liz.
I agree. We do need to build out energy resilience even before you get to the EMP issue. We saw at the Hurricane Sandy how devastating that can be for the North. And so the clean energy industry actually has been working very hard to make sure that we decentralize our grids. And now that we are focusing on that, rebuilding our grids throughout the country, we can probably work in some of those safeguards. That's another opportunity for us to build jobs and protect us at the same time. So I agree, and I will look forward to working with you.
Shelley?
I've heard a little bit about this issue, and I really don't know that much about it, but obviously it's serious. But it's related to another issue that I heard on the radio the other day, and that is that, I don't know if it was Russia or China, both of them have weapons to destroy satellites, space, and that our military is so dependent on GPS and other satellites that that's another concern of not affecting, say, the domestic use of products, but as far as our military, that we need to relook and examine how we protect our satellite systems for national defense. So it's somewhat similar.
They're all good questions. That's a particularly good one. There's nothing that we've discussed so far that could cause greater loss of life than that question. Right there.
Considering our Republican candidates running for U.S. Senate, would like to know, each one of you, if you could quickly state who you might support and a quick reason why you support that candidate.
It's a broadening of the topic, but I think we'll allow it.
That would help me determine which candidate. I just
And I did say there are no rules, so I gotta be honest. Liz, could you take a stab at that?
Sure. I haven't done any official endorsements, but I do appreciate the service of Kathy Schlega. I think she's done very well in the Republican caucus, as much as we have in the state house, the little that we have. And so, if one were to ask, her leadership would be very commendable, particularly going up against, as I said, the Democrats, either Chris Van Hollen or Donna Edwards. She would have a really great fight that she could work on.
Yeah, thank you.
RA.
I agree. I think that Kathy is actually has a solid record behind her legislative record. I think that she would be a good candidate to face whichever one of the Democrats comes out of the nominating process. And I think that we have and again, I think in general, but in any of these open seats, we have a tremendous opportunity to take them by Republicans because people in this district, people in this state are so concerned about issues that the Democrats just aren't focusing on. So we need a strong candidate like Kathy who actually has the opportunity to win that seat.
Thank you, RA. Jeff?
I've been challenged with figuring out how the district and running for Congress has been. So I'm going to wait till the general election and they've chosen one to then support them.
Dan?
I like Kathy. I met Kathy and I strongly support her. She was rated conservative by Heritage Alliance, iVoter Guide, as myself, and I appreciated the discussion I had with her. I also don't know any of the other candidates, so I heard about Richard Douglas. I think he's a wonderful man, but Kathy's rated conservative, and she's got a great opportunity to win this seat.
Great, Dan. Shelley?
I have not endorsed or publicly supported any candidate, whether for Senate or President, but have committed to support whoever wins in the general election.
Thank you very much. We're going to have one more question and then we'll have closing statements. By you all, not by me. The young lady back there.
There are many veterans who have come back and they're not the same way that they left. And I was wondering that they're not getting the help they're supposed to get from our government. The promise to give them help. What would you do for them?
Did everybody hear that? Okay, the question was, our veterans have come back, obviously from being deployed. They're not in the same shape. They were promised to be taken care of. That's not happening, and she has asked what you all will do for them. And we will start with you, Jeff, because I caught you looking at your
I'm blessed to have a retired Navy admiral in my congregation who's just been appointed to fix the mess at the Baltimore Veterans Hospital. And so we've had conversation directly about that. Our veterans deserve all the help we can get, and it's going to be issues of housing, issues of health, the challenges of the post-stress that they're facing. And we need to make sure that they get the help they need and to push it in Congress so that the Veterans Administration gets the resources that they need to do that.
Dan, you're next.
Yeah, absolutely. My granddad, both my grandfathers, veterans, and I personally had to assist trying to get my granddad some help, and he ended up having to travel various different hospitals because he could not get what he needed in Baltimore. I think it's a travesty. I would work very hard. I've made this an issue in my campaign because freedom is not free. I'm a member of the Sons of the American Legion, and I would work very hard to bring accountability to the VA.
I thought you were going to say Sons of the Pioneer and sing something. Shelley, could you go for the next?
Right, real quick, to quote from my flyer, veterans also offered Medicare, so that veterans have the option to obtain medical services at VA facilities and/or non-VA facilities. It was give them Medicare, let them have the option. You don't have the long waiting lines, you don't have the long travel. Medicare is there. There are a lot of hospitals and doctors outside of the VA. They should be able to go there. It's something that can be done very quickly, and yet for some reason it hasn't.
Thank you. Liz?
I'm part of a military family. My brother's actually an active Marine right now. He's a lieutenant colonel, will be at the end of the summer. My beautiful nieces were born at a veterans facility, so I appreciate their service for bringing them into the world. But unfortunately, we did not account for the casualties of war, for the wars that we've been in for the last 14, 15 years. And that's the issue. Unfortunately, when my brother came back from Iraq the first time, his issue was that the people who were treating him had never seen war. You know, we had that generation that missed out, that luckily had missed out on service. And so now the problem is huge that we need to focus on immediately. It's a personal issue for me because, by the grace of God, my brother hasn't had those issues, but my entire family, that's something that I will take personally. So
thank you, Liz. All right.
I think we absolutely have to do everything we can to ensure both access and also provisions that are available to veterans. I think it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also, if you think about it, a national security issue, because the longer that we're not providing for veterans, the more that our best and brightest will not be joining the military, and so our military won't be as strong as it possibly can be. So I think that we have an obligation as a government to provide for our veterans medically, to provide for mental health, but we also need to work with the private sector. There are a lot of companies that have really interesting programs to provide job opportunities for veterans, because people who are coming back, especially today, from Iraq and Afghanistan, have tremendous skills that we can benefit from if we utilize them correctly. And so we need to ensure that those programs are in place as well.
Thank you, R.A. We're going to have a closing statement. If you could keep them to a minute, please. We've had a good chance to listen to you for a while. And we will start with Dan and go from Dan down the road.
I'm asking for your vote of confidence and trust on April 26th. I believe I can bring the message that we all hold dear into this race, and I can do it with a compassion. I can do it with a passion. I believe jobs, freedom, and security are the three main issues that we're going to face, and I think that the Democrats are going to be vulnerable on each of those issues. I think that with my background as an former elected official and as an attorney who's been fighting, actually proven to fight for life, liberty, and property in court for the last decade, I can get in there and face-to-face work for you. My office would be open as well to you. It wouldn't be like we experienced with Chris Van Hollen with no access. I would have an opportunity for every person to talk to me personally. I would work very hard for you. And I believe that when we come to the debates this fall and come into the race, I think we're going to need a conservative center-right voice. We're going to need somebody who can actually show that there's a difference in the option. And I think with the electorate, the way it is, we could win. I ask for your vote.
Jack?
I'm asking for your vote because I think with all the great ideas that have circulated in this room and the talent at the table, unless we can get Congress to work together again like it's supposed to, we won't get anything through and we'll be stalemated for a very long time. I'm offering my services to the House of Representatives and as a representative of this district to show people that working together and finding the common cause and the common good in the middle of all this is very important. And it's going to require the ability to get people who won't talk to each other, who are so sold on their ideas that they won't compromise or find a place to get in the middle, that nothing gets done. And we can't live with nothing getting done with the sides split the way they are. Somebody needs to go in and say, my chief ambition in life, my desire is to bring people together, to use the talents and abilities that are in the room in a way that will move us forward. And I think that's got to be the priority. All the great ideas, if they're going to be stuck in each other's corners, nothing's going to happen. So somebody's got to say, let's move forward in the middle, let's work together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And we have a tremendous opportunity in this district, despite what's been said a couple times tonight. When the district was gerrymandered, we actually improved our odds here. We picked up more Republicans. Democrats are only 50% of the district now, which was not the case prior to 2012, which has provided us with a tremendous opportunity to actually, if we can grab the attention of the electorate, to send a Republican to Congress. And what the electorate is focused on is not whether or not the Senate's going to vote on a Supreme Court nominee or anything else that's grabbing newspaper headlines. The electorate wants jobs. They want the opportunity to create their own opportunity, to invest in their businesses, to ensure that their children have good education, that they have access to affordable health care, that we're dealing with our national security threats, and that we all have the ability to walk down the street feeling safe. And we need someone who actually can focus on those things and not get lost in all the partisan bickering that's taking place in Washington. And as someone who's worked in the private sector and the public sector, I understand the interface between the two, and I understand how to get that done. The members of Congress have a platform to start a conversation with their district, with voters across the country, to actually foster change, and that is exactly what I'll bring as your representative in Washington.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you all so much for your patience and your time. As I mentioned before at the top of the hour or so, we have to be bold and we have to take a stand for our district. Aria had mentioned the breakup of the party system. Yes, it's 49% Democrats, but it's also 23% Republicans, and the rest are independents. As the only person who actually took an active stance and stand for our gerrymandered district, I'm the only person who can bridge that gap. Everybody talks about bridging the gap. Everybody talks about making their voices heard. We're going to have a majority Republican House by next year. Still, I want to make sure, and I've always wanted to make sure that we had strong representation for our entire district. I urge you to support me. We can beat the Democrats at their own game. They will not be able to make their #1 argument against us. And quite frankly, unfortunately, the other guys can't make that case. So I urge you to make sure that I am a conservative. I'm a newly minted conservative. And I do think we need to get back to our founding principles as a party and protect life, liberty, and free enterprise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. Charlie? Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. This has been a very unique experience. We've been in a number of debates and forums, but not like this. It's really nice where the audience asks the questions and have a reasonable period of time. And I think it's the best of the ones that I've participated so far this year. So thank you for that. My highest priority is to get to a balanced budget. We've got to get our house in order. Let me explain one idea I have that can save us $30 billion a year. $30 billion a year. It's the Pell Grant program. The Pell Grant program right now is budgeted at $30 billion a year. And basically gives grants of up to about a little under $6,000 per student for people from low-income families. Okay? Very good program. It's been around for decades. But they don't do anything for it. It's free. My idea is to convert it to what I call the Shell Grant. And the Shell Grant would be that they have to be a volunteer first responder, police, fire, EMS, or a volunteer tutor or aide in a public school. Okay? Just like what President Kennedy said, you know, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So here's how we save the $30 billion. Right now, what we're doing is saying we still have the same $30 billion for rather than Pell Grants as Shell Grants. I then go to the states and say, you know, we give you lots of cash. The federal government gives the states lots of cash. So what I'm saying is, instead of $30 billion in cash, we're giving you $30 billion worth of services under the Shell Grant program. So the states come out whole. They still get the $30 billion, but not cash, but in services. And we, the federal government, save that $30 billion. So there's just one idea, one proposal that I have that can reduce the deficit by $30 billion a year.
Charlie, thank you very much. I don't think there's anything that makes the case better about why we ought to have a Republican in Congress than this group of people. They are fine, they're hardworking, they're putting it out there very hard, they know it, and that's something that all of us can be proud of. And I think something that all of you all can be proud of is yourselves. I'm looking at some of the same faces year after year, and you keep coming out, standing up for conservative principles, for Republicans, and I continue to be in awe of you, grateful for all of you, and I would like if everybody gave everybody a great big round of applause. The only thing I ask next time is if you could laugh louder at my jokes, especially when they're not funny. Thank you very much. Thank you.